But I grew up in Southern California. I spent my young childhood in Southern California. My dad, he went to seminary school to become a Baptist minister. And then eventually he said the Lord called him to Michigan in February. And I remember thinking from Southern California, boy, the Lord must really hate us, because I got off that plane, had never experienced, cold or anything like that. And he went through a couple of churches there and kind of settled into Saginaw area, the Saginaw, Michigan area, and that's where I spent my teenage years. Yeah, so when I was 11, I made out with my best friend, fully made out with my best friend. And growing up, we had a lot of tent revivals, and that meant that there were traveling preachers. And this one really preached a message about gay people, and I just felt compelled to go forward at the end at the salvation message, and I just cried my eyes out. My mom was just like, well, you're already saved, so what are you crying about, And I told her it was when I had lied to her when I was a kid about where I had gone somewhere. They had even sent police searching, the local mountains by California, and I just had lied about it. So I kind of fessed up about that, but I never did tell her about what had happened. And then I suppressed it. I just really just tamped it down. And because by the time I was 12, I actually had met my first husband when I was 12. Yeah. Pregnant by the time I was 17. And that was my first marriage was at 17. I had a baby at 17, 19, and 21. And by 21, I was divorced. I had missed college. I had these 3 young kids, and yet they were gone on weekends, so I would party. And my dad found out about it, and he said, I remember him saying, at one point he said, I can deal with you if you do drugs, I can deal with your divorces, but if you ever tell me you're a lesbian, I will disown you. Yeah, so it's funny because when I came out, one of the lesbians in town really was like, damn it, we lost our best straight ally. And I was like, but I'm a lesbian. And she was like, I know, but we really needed good straight allies, and you were what we had. And I really just felt like I had to make up for a lot of lost time, and wanted to use my advocacy skills, where it felt most natural, and that was working with the LGBTQ community in the world that I was already in, which was domestic and sexual violence world. In the domestic violence and sexual violence movement, there were pockets of people doing this work. There was Forge in Milwaukee, there was a committee that was doing statewide work. There were people who were touching on this work already, and I was learning. I was just kind of absorbing and learning about it. And we became the first shelter to actually have, in the state of Wisconsin, to have a policy about accepting trans people into shelter. The policy we created was, this was a women's shelter, so we were like, okay, we will accept trans women into shelter if they identify as trans 24 hours a day. Well, it didn't take me long to learn that there were a lot of trans women, it was not safe for them to identify as trans 24 hours a day. Like, if you turn a trans person away and they have to sleep on the street, it's a matter of life and death. This is the difference that's going to make people live or not live. So, we did that work, and that's just that's stuff that as part of a legacy of work that we've done that I'll always be proud of, and just making sure that they're safe spaces. After Harper House, I became the diversity coordinator for the city of Appleton with the mayor's office. And that work, there was a bullseye on me, because one, I was out and queer, and I was doing queer work. And that position, even though they'd had a diversity coordinator since the the mid 90s, they'd never done any gay work. It was all about racial stuff. It was all about, welcoming refugees, things like that. And it was at the time that there was the fight for marriage equality and domestic partner benefits in the state of Wisconsin. And so there was just a lot of fire around that. But, in that time, we were able to, this is before marriage equality, we were able to get domestic partner protections for the city of Appleton employees, and their partners, which was important. So I was doing all the work of a diversity coordinator, but it was the stuff that was making the news was the gay stuff. This man that I was working with from Christ the Rock called me, and I was like, okay, this person's calling me now. I need to prepare for what he's about to say. And he said, Kathy, I think this is a witch hunt, and I need you to know, when I look at the work you're doing, I see God. And they asked me to come in and talk about homelessness. And I did. And I remember before I got on the stage, I even said, this was after my dad had passed, I said, Dad, I'm preaching too. I'm just preaching a different message.